The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the hospital smell, not the antiseptic, not the blood, not the carpet of my apartment floor where I'd collapsed. Something else entirely. Something I had no reference point for, even after reading every book I'd ever picked up, every NDE account I'd consumed in the years before my own addiction swallowed me whole. Nobody had ever described it, not in any of those books, not in any testimony I'd ever heard. It wasn't a flower. It wasn't something sweet. It was the smell of something that had never died. And the moment I registered it, I knew I was somewhere that had nothing to do with the world I'd left behind. My name is Marcus. I was a cocaine addict for 11 years, and on a Tuesday night in November, I died. If you're new here, subscribe. I say that because what I'm about to tell you took me years to be able to speak out loud, and I want you to be here when the next piece comes, because this story doesn't end where you think it ends. And if anything I say today touches something in you, a memory, a fear, a question you've been carrying, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Some of the conversations down there have changed my life as much as what happened that night. So don't hold it in. Now let me take you back. I want to give you the clinical picture first, because the numbers matter. When the paramedics reached me, my heart had stopped. They worked on me for 34 minutes, 34 resuscitation attempts. That number came from the hospital report I obtained afterward. And when I saw it written on paper, I sat with it for a long time. 34 attempts to bring me back. Most people don't survive 10. The attending physician told my sister that by any reasonable medical expectation, I should not have made it. And the part of me that came back from wherever I went, that part agrees with him. The person who collapsed on that floor did not come back. Something returned, but it was not the same person. Here's what nobody tells you about the moment of death. It doesn't feel like falling asleep. It doesn't feel like anything you've ever experienced in your body, because it isn't your body doing it. It is something leaving. And what leaves is not your thoughts, not your memories, not your personality in the way you understand personality. What leaves is something underneath all of that. Something that was there before your name was given to you, before your first memory, before any of the stories you tell about yourself. And the second it leaves, the second the tether lets go, there is a clarity that I cannot explain using any language I have. It's like spending your entire life looking at a photograph of a mountain and then standing at the foot of that mountain. Every concept you had was correct in shape, but microscopic in scale. I didn't go somewhere bright. I want to be clear about that. The tunnel of light. That's not how it started for me. What I entered first was a kind of waiting. The only word I have for it is a corridor. Not dark, not light. A space between where I'd been and where I was going. And in that corridor, I was not alone. There were others. This is the part I need you to sit with, because this is what Jesus showed me. And this is what the title of this video is actually about. Those other presences in that corridor, I understood without being told, without words, that they were souls who had died the same way I was dying. Not just cocaine, all of it. Alcohol, heroin, fentanyl, meth, pills. People who had died inside their addiction. And the thing I understood about that space, the waiting, was that it was not punishment. It was not hell. It was something I didn't have a word for, and I still don't entirely. It was like a holding, like a breath being held before it releases. And the reason was something Jesus would explain to me in a way I never expected. But before I get there, I need to tell you about what was absent, because this is the thing that defined everything I experienced on the other side. And it is the thing I never hear talked about when people describe near-death experiences. Everyone talks about what they saw, the light, the figures, the life review. What nobody talks about is the absence, what was not there. There was no weight. I don't mean physical weight. I mean the weight of need, the craving. 11 years of cocaine, and I don't say that casually. I mean 11 years of my brain being hijacked, rewired, enslaved. And in that corridor, there was not one molecule of that pull remaining. Gone. Not suppressed, not managed, not white-knuckled through. Absent. Like it had never existed. And the shock of that, the recognition of what I had been carrying, and the recognition that I was no longer carrying it, produced something I can only describe as grief and relief arriving at the same moment. I had been so heavy. I had not known how heavy I was until the weight was gone. And with that recognition came something else. A presence. Not a voice, not a figure at first. A presence that moved toward me the way warmth moves from a fire. You feel it before you see the source. And when it resolved into something I could perceive, it was a figure of light. And I knew, with the same certainty I had when I recognized the smell of that place, that this was Jesus. Not a concept, not a theological position, not the stained glass version, a person, more real than anything I had ever encountered in my life. And he looked at me, not like a judge. That's the thing I have to communicate. He looked at me the way you would look at someone you had been waiting for, someone you had known was coming and had been watching for, and had not stopped watching for the entire time they were lost. He didn't ask me to account for myself. He didn't open a ledger. What he did was something I have tried to describe to my sister, to my therapist, to the few people in my life I've trusted with this. And every time I try, language shrinks beneath the thing I'm pointing at. He showed me, and before he showed me anything about my own life, he stood there with me. That's the word I keep coming back to. He stood there, like someone who had run a long distance to reach another person, and then stopped and just stood with them for a moment before saying anything. There was no rush. Whatever time means on the other side, and I have tried to explain to people that time doesn't work the way we understand it. It isn't a line. It's more like a depth. In that depth, he just stood there with me. And I knew I was fully known. Not known the way people know you through what you've told them. Known the way you would know a painting if you had made every brushstroke yourself. Every part of me, including the parts I had spent 11 years trying to bury under cocaine, was visible and held without flinching. He showed me what I had been from before I was born. Not my life on earth, my existence before that. The real weight and value of it. And then he showed me what addiction had done, not as moral failure, not as weakness, not as sin in the punishing sense, but as a wound. An open wound that had been bleeding out everything I was. And the wound had a beginning. I could see it. A moment, an event, a thing that happened before the drugs, that the drugs were an answer to. A wrong answer to a real pain. And he said, and I use the word said loosely because this wasn't spoken. It was transferred directly into the center of my knowing. He said, every soul that dies inside addiction comes through here first. Not to be judged, to be seen. Before the judgment, every soul is shown what they truly were beneath the addiction, who they were before the wound. Because judgment without that seeing would not be justice. Let me say that again, because it's important. He told me that no soul who dies in addiction goes directly to judgment without first being shown what they truly were beneath it, the fullness of their identity, not the shell the addiction made of them. Before judgment, they are seen. I don't know how long I was there. Time did not work the way it works here. I was shown things about my own life I could not have known consciously, decisions I had made that had effects I never witnessed, kindnesses that had rippled out from me in moments I'd forgotten, damage that had also rippled out, carried now by people I loved. I saw the cost of what I'd done without the cost being used as a weapon. It was simply true, the way 2 + 2 is true, not accusation, reality. And then he told me I was going back. I did not want to go back. I want to be honest about that. The relief of having the weight gone, after 11 years of carrying it, the thought of returning to a body that would wake up craving again was not something I embraced. And he acknowledged that. He didn't dismiss it. He said, again in that transferred, direct way, that what I had experienced would not be taken from me when I returned, that I would carry this, that it would be the new floor under everything. I want to tell you what happened when I came back because the 34 attempts, all of that resuscitation, I came back on the 34th. The doctor told my sister it was inexplicable, clinically inexplicable. The brain damage that should have occurred had not occurred. There was no explanation for it. I woke up and the first thing I did was cry. Not from pain. I want to be honest about why I was crying. I was crying because I could feel the weight again. The body I'd come back into was still marked by 11 years of what I'd done to it. The craving was not gone. I want to be completely honest with you about that. The craving came back. The body remembered even though something in me had changed. But here's the difference. Here is what he meant when he said the experience would be the new floor. Before, the craving had an argument. It had a case to make. It could point to the emptiness inside me, the wound that had been there before the drugs, and say, this is the only thing that fills this. That argument had been airtight for 11 years. I could not defeat it. I had tried rehab 3 times. I had tried religion. I had tried relationships. I had tried willpower. Nothing broke the argument. After, the argument was empty, because I had seen what I truly was, not through therapy, not through someone telling me I had value. I had seen it the way you see a mountain when you're standing at its foot. The wound was still there. But the lie that the drug was the only answer to the wound, that lie had no traction anymore. And without traction, the craving was just a physical sensation, uncomfortable, manageable, real, but not the truth. I've been clean for 4 years now. I don't say that to make this story tidy. I say it because the experience did exactly what he said it would do. It became the foundation. Every time the craving comes, and it still comes, I won't pretend it doesn't. I return to that floor, to what I saw, to the weight that was absent on the other side. And the argument falls apart. The first year was still hard. I want to be real about that. The experience didn't remove the physical reality of withdrawal or the psychological rewiring of 11 years of dependency. I still went to treatment. I still did the work. What changed was not the difficulty of the work. It was what I was standing on while I did it. Before the NDE, recovery felt like climbing a wall with nothing under my feet. Every gain was fragile because the foundation was fragile. Willpower runs out. Motivation fades. Determination is just a feeling, and feelings change. After, the foundation was not made of any of those things. It was made of what I had seen, what had been shown to me. And that doesn't fade. 4 years in, it has not faded. If anything, it has become more solid, the way concrete cures over time into something harder than it was when it was first poured. I go to meetings twice a week. I sponsor 2 people. And the thing I bring into those rooms, the thing I offer when someone is struggling with whether any of this is worth it, when the argument comes back and the craving says, see, this is all there is, I bring the smell. I bring the absence of weight. I bring the corridor and the presence and the certainty that before any accounting, there is a seeing. I don't preach it, I hold it. And sometimes that holding does more than any argument I could make. Here's what I want to say to you directly. Whether you're someone in addiction or someone who loves someone in addiction, what I saw in that corridor, all those other souls, held in that space of being seen before judgment, the quality of what surrounded them was not wrath. I want to be very clear about this. It was grief, a grief that came from love, the grief of something precious that had been lost. Every single soul in that corridor was precious, not as a concept, actually precious. The weight of that was almost unbearable to perceive, and Jesus' presence there was not distant or administrative. He was there, in the corridor, with those souls, waiting with them. I don't know what happens after the seeing. I was not shown that. What I was shown was the seeing itself, the mercy of it, that no soul goes to judgment as only the worst version of themselves, that the wound is acknowledged before the accounting, that the person beneath the addiction is the one who stands before God, not just the addict. I want to go back to the corridor for a moment, because I don't think I've given you the full weight of what it was. When I perceived those other souls, and I want to be careful with how I describe this because saw isn't quite right. It wasn't visual the way vision is visual here. It was more like an awareness of presences, the way you are aware of someone standing behind you. I understood that this was not a place of suffering. That's the thing I need to say clearly. The corridor was not a place of punishment, but it was not neutral either. There was sorrow there, not inflicted sorrow, accumulated sorrow, the sorrow of what had been lost, the sorrow of lives that had been swallowed before they could be lived. And that sorrow was real. It was not dismissed. It was held, the same way grief is held by someone who loves you. Not fixed, not explained away, held. And the mercy of the seeing, of being shown who they truly were before the wound and the addiction consumed them, was the mercy of not being known only as the worst version of yourself. Think about that. Every one of us who gets labeled, addict, junkie, user, lost cause, there is a person underneath that label who existed before the first use, before the first craving, before the choice that was made out of a pain that had no other answer available at the time. And what Jesus was showing me, in that corridor with those souls, was that the label is not the whole person. The addiction is not the whole person. Before judgment, the whole person is seen, the real one. I've wrestled with whether or not to share certain parts of this. The other souls I perceived, some of them I knew, not personally, but I recognized them the way you recognize something from a dream that you can't fully explain. One of them was someone from my own life. I'm not going to say who because that's not mine to share, but the recognition broke me open in a way I am still processing. This experience is not a theology. I am not a theologian. I'm a guy who did too much cocaine on a Tuesday night and should have died but didn't. What I'm telling you is what I saw and what I was shown. You can do what you want with it. But here's what I will say. The gift, and I do call it that now, even though for the first year after I refused to call it anything but a trauma, the gift is not the dramatic story of almost dying. The gift is what I wake up with every morning, a floor that doesn't move, a certainty about my own worth that didn't come from anyone's opinion of me, a direct encounter with something real, and the knowledge that that something real was present in that corridor with every soul who passed through it in chains. I carry that into every day, into the meetings I go to, into the conversations I have with other people who are still in it. When I sit across from someone who is where I was, drowning in that weight, convinced the drug is the only answer to the wound, I carry what I know into that room. Not as a lecture, not as a testimony they have to accept, just as a presence, the same way it was given to me. That's the life it enables. Not a perfect life, not a clean and sorted and tied up life, a life with a floor. And for someone who spent 11 years with no floor, who fell every time because there was nothing to land on, that is the whole difference. If you're watching this and you're in it right now, I want you to hear this directly. Not as a comfort that makes the situation feel smaller than it is. The corridor is real, the seeing is real, and the presence that is waiting there, that grief that comes from love, it is for you too. It was for me. It was for all of those souls I perceived around me. None of them were unseen. Not one. That's why I'm here. That's why I keep saying this out loud even when it's hard. Because I was shown something and I was sent back. And the only reason I can make sense of being sent back is to bring it with me and give it away. That's my mission. And if you're watching this, I think it might be part of yours too. Not to have had an NDE, not to have died, just to carry the truth that people in the deepest places are not outside the reach of being seen. If that resonated with you, if something in this landed somewhere real, tell me in the comments. What did it touch? What question did it raise? What part of this do you want me to go deeper on? I'll be there. And if you're new here, subscribe. I have more to say. There's more to this story, and I think you're here for a reason.